Welcome back to Thoroughly Entertained. On this week's episode, The Future Is Now. It's very sci-fi heavy. We saw Tom Cruise's new movie Oblivion and the new sci-fi series Defiance.
In the new sci-fi movie Oblivion, mankind has been forced to leave the destroyed Earth after a war between aliens and humans. Tom Cruise and his partner Victoria are the cleanup crew that are trying to make sure that the machines are operating, which are providing resources for the people off-planet. So Scott, tell me what you liked about the movie Oblivion.
Well, one of the things I liked about it is I thought it was a really visually interesting movie. I thought they used some really cool ideas of how the Earth would look after it's been devastated by this conflict, and I like the way that you kind of felt like the world was swallowing up all like the man-made things. Like they showed skyscrapers and apartment buildings that were kind of like swelled over by these big mounds of dirt and kind of being crushed back down into the Earth. I thought that the technology concepts were cool. I thought the story had some really good twists and turns. You never really feel like you have a handle on where the story is going because they keep kind of pulling the rug out from under you. There was a lot of things that I liked about this movie.
I agree. There was a lot of very strong elements. Tom Cruise did a solid job as Jack, one of our last remaining humans on the Earth that's doing the scavenge work. I visually thought it was interesting, the very white, gray, chrome Apple Store look or feel to it, And that's sort of like the trend in modern sci-fi movies.
Right. But
for me, the middle third of the movie was just, the movie is so quiet as a whole, with only 5 people with speaking parts. Like that middle third was just a little long for me, and so that was part of what I didn't like about the movie.
And I think and I agree with you that middle third is just kind of drags a little bit, because I think they're trying too hard to establish his isolation.
Right.
The fact that he's alone so much of the time. He has Victoria, who's kind of exists through his headset for most of his day as he flies these recon missions around the planet. He only has her in his ear, and then the few hours where they're together every night before they go to bed and then before he leaves in the morning. And so they do so much to establish how isolated that Jack Harper is that I think they spend too much time on that, and they don't do enough to develop the human relationships in the movie that end up being the thing that I think falls flat the most.
Right, and the other thing that's missing in this particular movie for me was a strong emotional core.
Right. Although
it's visually interesting and has some nice surprises, and the show kept me engaged with what was happening. Tom Cruise is supposed to have 2 love interests, and we don't really feel a strong emotional connection with either of them. And because that's missing, I don't care as much about what happens there as I should, given that there really is only 5 people that talk, and so you should care more about these characters that are on the screen.
Well, and because of that, you never get super emotionally invested, because ultimately the story is about the survival of mankind.
Right.
Like, that is the crux of the story, is how do we survive after our planet's been devastated, after our resources are almost gone, after there's, only a small handful of people that survive. Like, how do we go on? And there's not enough humanity in the movie to make you connect with a story that should ultimately apply to everybody. Everyone should be curious about how we would live through something so horrific, like how would mankind continue on? And again, yes, in what is becoming a running theme with Tom Cruise in a lot of his movies, he had absolutely zero chemistry with either Olga Kurylenko or Andrea Riseborough, who play at different times his love interest in this film. And there's no spark between them.
Right.
And so, you're not invested in the relationship the 2 of them have together, and their relationships are supposed to be the example of what humankind has left to survive for in the first place. So it's difficult. Like, it's difficult to get the emotional connection in a movie that doesn't focus enough on the emotions of the people in it.
Right. So we would have given this movie probably an A had there been more emotional connection to it, but we both agree the solid B for Oblivion. It's still an engaging and interesting movie, and I would still recommend seeing it, but it just had a few pieces missing for us.
Exactly. And for us, we are trying to grade things as objectively as we can, and if there's something just kind of holding you back from enjoying it, like, that tends to be a significant thing, and that dropped it an entire letter grade for me, from an A to a B.
Right. So, moving on to Defiance, this show you really enjoyed. So tell me why.
Because
I didn't really enjoy it.
I know you were a little bit bored by it, and I will admit that Defiance was aired in a 2-hour premiere. I think it was a little bit overkill running it as 2 hours because it was 2 episodes kind of tacked together. The second hour I thought was really, really interesting and compelling. And the overarching storyline is, in kind of a similar theme to Oblivion, is that aliens have come to Earth to escape kind of their dying solar system, and they need a place to live. And, you know, a battle ensues between mankind and these alien races, and eventually a peace accord is struck, and the aliens live on Earth with people. But because of, you know, the lingering resentments over the wars and the fact that the Earth is now a much different place than it was, you know, there's tension between those people. And this story is set in a kind of a border town built
named Defiance.
Named Defiance, which is built in the ruins of St. Louis. And kind of a lot of the times you see like the remains of like the St. Louis Arch in the background. That's kind of a framing piece in a lot of the sequences. And it reminded me a lot of a series I really liked, which was Firefly, which is a Joss Whedon series.
Fantastic.
And I like the elements of the story where it's kind of like, it's almost kind of a Western set in a sci-fi setting. I really liked Grant Bowler's lead character, Jeb Nolan. I thought there was a lot of interesting elements to it, and I thought the show really picked up a lot of momentum in the second hour and led me to think it's going to be a really good show going forward.
Well, I know for me, had they broken it up into 2 one-hour episodes, I would not have ever watched that second episode because I disliked the first hour so much, and it just did not capture my interest in any way. But I am not a sci-fi fan typically.
Right.
It has to be amazingly strong content for me to connect to it on an emotional level because I need the emotion of a show. That's why I actually enjoyed the last third of the movie, the television series, because it finally got to the core heart of it. And it interested me enough that I would be willing to watch a second episode because it had that. Had it only just been that, I would not have ever turned to it again to watch it.
And I agree. I think that was the strength of the show ultimately is, again, where we kind of bemoan the lack of the humanity in Oblivion, I think, and especially like you said in the second hour of the Defiance premiere, I think it was all about the relationships of the people. And I think they kind of set up some interesting dynamics in this town between like this alien element who runs kind of the underworld gambling and like, you know, kind of the illicit operations, you know, as opposed to kind of the humans who work in the mining areas and are kind of the labor force in this town. And, you know, there's conflicts. You see, you know, these kind of racial divides between these alien races and the humans and how, you know, there's kind of that crackling tension between them as they try to live together in kind of an uneasy harmony.
Right. So it's something that could be excellent, and I will turn into, you know, like the second episode, and we'll see if I like it a little more. But like I said, because this is not my typical genre, I just didn't have the same level of connection with it as
right,
you did.
And I can appreciate that because, again, not everyone's going to connect to the same type of subject matter. But for me, again, I think the fact that the show picked up so much momentum going towards the end of it that I think it really looks like it's going to be a good series. And the Sci-Fi Network, you know, it has its hits and misses, but its hits are usually really good. It's Battlestar Galactica, Eureka, Warehouse 13, like, you know, Being Human. Like, those shows are really, really good. And this looks like one of those type of shows. And it gives me a lot of confidence in the fact that I think this could be a good series. And so, because of the potential that I saw in it and the direction I think it's going, I was willing to give it an optimistic A-.
Where, because I disliked so much of the initial part of it, I only gave it a C+.
Okay.
So.
But we'll give it I'm going to keep watching and see how it's going. I'll give some episode recaps to see if the show continues its positive momentum, and hopefully it does.
All right.
All right.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of Thoroughly Entertained. Make sure to visit our website and enter your email address because you can get our free summer movie guide. Next week, we'll be reviewing the new Matthew McConaughey movie, Mud, as well as 2 albums, Paramore's new self-titled album, Paramore, as well as Michael Bublé's album, To Be Loved. As always, make sure to check out our website at thoroughlyentertained.com, and we'll see you next week on our quest to be thoroughly entertained.